T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast. Today is episode 68, and with me is the OG himself, Board Gamer. Thank you for joining me for the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. How you doing?
Yeah, all right, I suppose. I told you pre-podcast a little bit hungover from the weekend.
Yes.
And sorting out lots of admin and chores at home that have annoyed me. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good, thank you.
He was busy drinking to celebrate the MSR's victory over the Cutlass Black, from what I've heard. Just rumor.
I'm a big fan of the Cutlass Black as well. Mercury Star Runner is my favorite ship.
Okay.
But I have a lot. I do not take pleasure in it being defeated.
Do you think it's going to make it all the way this year?
I think the Mercury Star Runner it's gonna be first or second. It's a fantastic ship. I've got a lot of love for the Cutlass Black as well. It's just it's a shame they had to go against each other.
Yeah, Cutlass is probably the most well-rounded ship I can think of in that size range. Really good.
Yeah.
So today I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk a little bit about Star Citizen, well, a lot about Star Citizen, but also kind of that in relation to Squadron 42. There's a lot of questions out there surrounding the two. Okay. A lot of people came in late and don't even know about Squadron 42, and I think people have some misconceptions of it. So I thought we'd start there and then just kind of move into some discussion about 318 and stuff, and we'll go through it like that. So to start us off, how about, can you tell us what was the original pitch for Star Citizen?
So in 2012, we had the original Kickstarter, and that was pretty much Star Citizen and Squadron 42 pitched at the same time, where Star Citizen was the persistent universe, and you'd be able to play it, I believe, both on and offline, and friends would be able to join you, and you'd be able to go around and defeat Vandal and blow them up, and do very sort of Elite Dangerous-esque activities as well, cargo running and all that sort of jazz. A lot more simple than it is now in Star Citizen for sure. But also the Squadron 42 campaign was sort of part of that, and that was a single player experience that sounded a bit like almost a tutorial or a way of getting you trained up for the persistent universe, because you'd go in to Squadron 42, you'd fight some Vandal, you'd have a distinguished career. It's sort of like a little bit like Wing Commander is the idea, and then you'd come back into the persistent universe afterwards with some like money in your pocket and citizenship was the idea. And it was very much sold as sort of both of them coming together. No subscriptions, no sort of pay to win stuff, and it was a very basic version of what Star Citizen and Squadron 42 have now bloated into.
Okay, so they were both there, right, in the beginning. What were people more interested in, at least from what you could tell of the original backers?
That's a really hard thing to tell, because I wasn't tracking what people were saying at that time in the same way.
Yeah.
I think people wanted a bit of both. Obviously, they probably saw Chris Roberts and Wing Commander fame. So when he's talking about Squadron 42 basically being a online, offline, co-op potential game that your friends could join you in playing, they're probably pretty interested in that. I think some people already saw the sort of a bit of a diamond in the rough with what Star Citizen could be, because they were even at that time they were talking about it being moddable as a game, very like moddable multiplayer, and you can have your own servers. So that sort of like people were like, oh, we can do total conversions and stuff already, and have like whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek and stuff like, or Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, which would be awesome.
But I can't really tell what people were more interested in at the time. Obviously, the sort of funding goals. A lot of that was for Star Citizen's persistent universe, rather than those sort of rewards were being more geared towards ships and stuff that had value, but also, I suppose, lots of physical items.
Yeah, yeah. What were you more interested in?
Probably Star Citizen's persistent universe, but at that stage, I wasn't that interested in either. It wasn't until late 2013 or sort of early 2014 I got interested in Star Citizen properly. Like, I backed it on Kickstarter, but that was about it.
Okay, so well, let's back up a minute. Were you doing YouTube and content stuff before that, or you started that with Star Citizen? I think I've asked you that before, but
So I started doing content with things like Diablo 3 and Titanfall.
okay.
And
I wouldn't have thought you were a Titanfall guy.
I was one of the, I think I was 13th in the world to get Gooser achievement. I was really into Titanfall.
Nice. Yeah, it was a good game.
Really into it.
Gosh, that was a good game.
Yeah, I got really yeah. I still love Titanfall. Titanfall 2 is great as well.
Yeah.
But I was doing YouTube for a little bit, and had some success with Diablo 3 before then sort of getting quite interested in Star Citizen.
Okay. I actually didn't know that. I thought you were always doing Star Citizen stuff. So I wasn't really around back then. I think I probably started paying attention sometime mid 2014 or so. But I do hear a lot of people talk about like, oh, we don't hear about Squadron 42. They're putting all this time into Squadron 42, but nobody really cares about it. And really, I wanted to get in this conversation because I don't actually know. I go onto the Kickstarter page and I see that they talk about the persistent universe as one of the stretch goals. And so it starts to get a little confusing how they refer to everything. But
so that's an interesting one, because I believe that they talked about Star Citizen being the Star Citizen game being referring to it as a persistent universe a couple of times in the original Kickstarter as well. And they do make a definite distinction between the single player campaign, which is Squadron 42, although it's sort of single player style because you could play it co-op.
yeah, it's more structured.
Yeah, and a persistent universe, or what is now become what we know as the persistent universe. But because when I was writing a couple of notes down, I was like, well, actually, I would refer to it as just Star Citizen's universe before, and the persistent universe is a new idea, but it's definitely mentioned in the Kickstarter persistent universe.
Okay. It's really interesting. The whole way that it unfolded, I'm sure plenty of people would say, they should have done only one game at a time. They should have done both of them at the same time, or kind of how they did by using one to fund the other.
I think that originally, though, obviously the scale of them was both a lot smaller, and
right, yeah,
the Squadron 42 stuff was just supposed to be a set of more interesting, theme park ride missions that could be played in the Star Citizen universe, so that it was sort of played in the same game almost. And also with the Kickstarter and all of the communication at that time, it was quite vague, poorly defined in some situations. And I think that might have been by design to give them a bit more wiggle room, but also because they were a very junior company at that point.
Right. Do you think at that point they were expecting that it was going to grow enough that they'd be able to change the idea like they did?
No, not to the extent that it did. I mean, there's no way that they thought it was going to raise
to this
millions
point,
and millions and millions. I mean, they once it hit like 2 million, I think they started chucking up stretch goals on the funding website, and then that just exploded so quickly to like 29 million.
So they were at a point where they were surprised at 2 million, and we're now approaching 500 million. Clearly, they didn't set out with this idea. How do you think they handled that? It's a massive expansion. It's way further than they could have expected.
I mean, there's a bit of Star Citizen as a studio has been a bit erratic. and there were certainly growing pains at the beginning. They sort of kept on scaling up for what they wanted, and that kept on changing as they got more and more money in. So I think the early days of Star Citizen were troubled up until 2015, 2016, like quite genuinely,
Yeah.
because we it, it, it was a bit crazy because they basically want, bam, you've got your original Kickstarter, and then they sort of, you got your two little modules. You got your Star Citizen, you got your Squadron 42, and then they expanded the scope of Squadron 42 when they sort of hit that 2 million in funding,
Mm-hmm.
and then they said it was going to have like a 30 mission system for Squadron 42 for the campaign. Got 30 missions, and then it was 35 missions. Then it was a much richer story and 45 missions. Then it was celebrities and 50 missions, and then it was, well, actually, we want to have professional motion capture from those celebrities, and we're going to have an expansion pack. So the expansion pack was basically another set of missions beyond that, which effectively then in the modern era has become episode 2 and 3 for
Right.
Star Citizen, which are 2 more games.
Yeah.
So
it,
and then we had that $29 million goal. And the reason I want to point that out, and I say up to 29 million, because people will look on the funder maybe and go, well, there's loads more funding coming in immediately after that. Why did you pick that? Well, that's when Squadron 42 really decouples from Star Citizen, because they basically went, let's have enhanced mission design and actually start putting a load of development resources on making Squadron 42 a true spiritual successor to Wing Commander, and sort of having that modern gameplay there, the stuff that you can only do with the bleeding edge of tech.
Okay. So those people who got in before that point, I mean, obviously everybody has the right to comment about what the idea was when they jumped in and how it might have changed until now. And I don't fault anybody for that. The game's taken a while. A lot of people, it's gone ways they didn't expect. But those people genuinely were signed up for a different experience. They were looking at a game that was essentially one big game with 2 different kind of paths you can take, as opposed to now a completely separate game and a big MMO.
Yeah, I mean, the scope has expanded quite a lot. I think originally a lot of people were, yeah, I suppose you could see it as the sort of same game with just a single player little mission campaign attached. But yeah, I think a lot of people are probably quite right to have been annoyed back in the day, because they're like, I wanted to play what was originally pitched, and now I'm going to have to wait, what, 5-10 years to get something that I can play, which is not necessarily the same thing that I originally backed.
Yeah, that's just kind of rough. How do you feel about how they've gone about it, using sort of the Star Citizen funding to help build Squadron 42, which, you know, then goes back and helps Star Citizen, which after 10 years of it almost, with very clear differences in some of that time. What's been your take?
So I love the Star Citizen project, sort of warts and all, the community, the devs, just all of it. I quite like the direction they've gone and the expanding scope. There are big problems with it. I think they could have done a lot of stuff a lot differently. I think that the game probably wouldn't have been funded in the same way if they had gone a different route or a different path. It's an interesting one with Squadron 42, because you just said there, most of their funding does come from basically the persistent universe and selling ships for that. But obviously, the lion's share of development and resources is going into Squadron 42. Now, obviously, they share tech and everything, and it trickles down into the persistent universe eventually. But they need to make a genuinely great game with Squadron 42 to sort of justify that in the end. And I think that is something that some people are worried about. I'm not so much. I quite like what they're producing. It's just the development time is incredibly slow, and CIG's communication is erratic sometimes. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's awful.
Yeah, it sometimes it's all over the place.
Yeah, but I'm sort of quite bullish on Star Citizen. I sort of always am.
Yeah, I mean, it is it is a special project. You know, for anybody who has ever been interested in anything sci-fi media, whether it's a movie or a TV show or a video game or maybe even a book, like this can capture the things that draw you to that stuff, and it's really cool to be able to interact with that. I am also very bullish on Star Citizen. For those who didn't know, yeah. Mentioned in chat here from one of the supporters watching live was the vote that they had very early on. A popular topic pointed back to in terms of the development. I think this had to do with the Planet Tech, but I can't remember completely. They had a vote, maybe 2014 or so, and like 80% of the community had voted for kind of, I think it was something like, should we take the money we have now and build the game, or should we continue to bring in funding and expand? And I think like 80% of people or so voted to expand.
Yeah, so I didn't see the vote at that time. So yeah, and basically a lot of people wanted to expand the scope of the game and make Star Citizen kind of what it is into now. I think most of those people thought the game was already going to be done by now, though.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's fair to say. Star Citizen's a very strange thing where it maintains that live alpha product now that's playable and has development as a service almost going on at the same time, which seems to work amazingly well funding wise. And obviously, a lot of players enjoy playing the game in a raw state now that keeps on expanding and might be the game of their dreams eventually. I think there's a bit of cognitive dissonance that goes on there, but I mean, I'm happy to wait. If you're not, then I think that's also fine. If people can complain about stuff, I think that's reasonable for people to vent.
Yeah, it's never crazy to me when people are angry about the amount of time it's taken. It just you hear it a lot, for good reason. But I wonder, I always wonder to myself, like, when did the people who voted for that expansion, at what point were they like, okay, it's good, it's expanded enough, let's get it done? Because like everybody had a certain point when they were like, all right, this is good, and I think we should probably wrap things up. Even now, you know, people are saying this summer or just this last month, they're like, okay, let's make the game. And I always wonder how long people last with that.
Well, I think a lot of the larger backers, the ones that put more money in, they've become the whales we have today in the game. Not all of them. They got some newer whales for sure, but I think a lot of people have gone along with the ride and they're enjoying it to some extent, or they might have some criticism of it, but they're still putting money into it.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely in a better place now, and we'll talk about this a little later, but it's definitely in a more confidence building place now than I think past years. So, you know, I understand that people are sticking around.
They have massive studios now. They have a huge amount of funding. They've proved they can produce content on a regular basis, and some of that content's pretty good. I think there's still some problems with the project and the management and the studios and stuff like that, but you're going to get that with any project. But the fact that they're still expanding their scope and they're getting these massive studios in the UK with thousands of people, well, I think it's 1,200 employees space they've got in the UK now.
Jeez.
Gosh. It's such a big expansion.
Yeah. Well, going back to something you said about the way that the game kind of changed, and you also acknowledged that you've enjoyed the way the game has changed. Can you speak a little bit more towards what you've liked about the change and how it's grown?
So I'm a sucker for more ships and increased scope. Some people call it feature creep. It's not feature creep if you've got the money, time, and the sort of talent to be able to do it. And Star Citizen, you said special, I'd say unique. It's a unique project it's gonna. If it succeeds, lots of other projects will do the same in the future. If it fails, then no other project will do it for many, many, many years, or very few. But it's unique in the fact that it can fund like it is and expand like it is. And I really like sort of the it just clunking along, warts and all. I like when they get stuff right. I like it when they get stuff wrong. I just sort of I'm along for the ride.
I always feel that the feature creep that people talk about when it comes to the game, a lot of times is, and this might be feature creep because it really depends on your definition and what you think of it, but I see the way that they will take a feature that's always been planned for the game, and since it was only planned for the game and they never detailed it out, they start to add detail and talk more about the gameplay that's involved in that. And that looks like feature creep because it's bringing things to light that weren't necessarily fleshed out before.
Yep.
What
Yep,
do you,
totally agree with you.
yeah, what do you think? Is there any way around that? I mean, they
Um,
have to detail
yeah,
it, right?
there's a way around it. Is have it less detailed, have it more shallow. Like, what do you want your game to be like? Do you want it to be finished and complete and have a reasonable amount of stuff to do, like Elite Dangerous, or do you want it to be have a huge amount of fidelity and be quite complex and very detailed, like what they want to do with the Star Citizen? And that's not a poke at Elite Dangerous. I think Elite Dangerous works for what it does. I think No Man's Sky does what it does very well now that it's been heavily updated. And I think if you're more wanting that immersion and fidelity, and you want more complex gameplay, definitely in a smaller amount of star systems, then Star Citizen is for you. I mean, do you even want to talk about them having visitable planets and that sort of scale of that? And that's what really has made the project sort of bloated and delayed so much.
Yeah.
But I still want it. still want it.
I mean, it's funny when you see the way that other developers talk about some of that stuff. One of the popular examples being this last summer when Todd Howard came out and said about Starfield that they don't want to have the transition to the planets because of the amount of work it would be. And you know, you see that, hey, Star Citizen's taken a long time to do that stuff, but it's kind of, we're starting to see more and more examples of why that's difficult and why it might have taken them a long time.
Starfield's a really good example as well, because I suspect it'll be released. I suspect it will have some good elements, but I suspect the planets will be pretty bare, relatively empty, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that people are like, oh, I thought it's going to have this, or I thought it's going to be a bit more detailed in the space combat and stuff. And you go, well, no, because they wanted to release a game in a timely manner, and to do that, they have to make a huge amount of concessions.
Yeah. I am
Star Citizen, no concessions.
I am
none.
Super hyped for that game. I just like space games, and I'm and especially RPGs. That's kind of where I came from before Star Citizen. And a space RPG, we don't get that very often. So I'm pumped for it. But I do think that when I go to places like the subreddit for the game, I see a lot of people talking about getting features that I'm like, that just doesn't sound possible. They're talking about like being able to change the components of spaceships and edit the way that it starts up and the engineering of it. And I'm like, let me welcome you to to us trying to make that work. Because yeah, a lot of people think that, I think games are easier to make than they are.
Okay, yeah.
So going more in that direction and talking about game development itself, anybody who's been around Star Citizen long enough has heard about a lot of different ideas for the development, whether it's staggered development or agile development, which I believe is a kind of a standard. Star Citizen has always done kind of a meandering way of making the game. When do you feel like, or rather, I'll start with this. Staggered development was the first kind of time I remember them talking about their development in any way and like selling it to the crowd. Do you feel like that actually turned into anything?
I mean, they certainly tried to do staggered development, and they've divided time up between the teams more readily. If you look at the roadmap, for example, on Progress Tracker, they are sort of doing staggered development with quarters and what they sort of plan to have content coming out. But it really, staggered development is relatively dead, in my opinion. They do try to work on the next couple of patches. You can sort of see that from the sort of features that they're working on, but
it's kind of there, but not.
Yeah, I mean, it was a buzzword for them to say, look, the way we're currently developing is pretty slow, and we're going to try do this. And that sort of works, but not when you've got giant features that you need to get out with like persistent entity streaming and server meshing, which if you go, well, actually, we need to release that next. Well, that's done when it's done. Like they can't release other stuff before that because they've got it's waiting on that implementation for them to then move on to more.
It kind of felt at times like some of the teams were staggering in that you could hear about a lot of the work they were doing for the following quarter, like in monthly reports, whereas other teams were just always working on whatever was the next release.
And I think staggered development is there still, and they're sort of doing it, but it's a bit more convoluted, and there's just teams working on whatever they need to priority-wise. Staggered development is more just a prioritization development now, and Clan Imperium have always been really erratic with their sort of development stuff. There's a bit of delay going on with when they were trying to build up their studios and trying to find their feet and trying to expand the game, but the development now is just in a significantly better place.
Right.
I mean, you can see they've got many more teams working on much more stuff. They're able to get content out for the most part each quarter, and obviously they are hitting the sort of largest milestones they've ever hit in forms of tech with persistent entity streaming and then server meshing and Alpha 4.0, which has caused a bit of a shake-up. But I think it's in a much better place.
When do you think those? I kind of touched on this already earlier. When do you think those development woes that were really holding the game back, that kind of garnered that reputation it has now, when do you think those started to fade away?
Probably 2016. 2016, there was a mixture of some really good engagement and some terrible engagement. And I think then they were able to iron out a lot more. And then 2017 and stuff, you started to get a much better stuff from the project. And then unfortunately, we had problems with COVID and things like that, which caused a bit more of a delay in some areas. But I think Star Citizen did pretty well overall.
Yeah, so now it really feels like, even given the pandemic over the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, it really feels like they've hit a stride. Do you think there's any specific reason for that?
I think a lot of people were stuck at home and wanted to play space games and were had more disposable income than they thought they'd have.
But in terms of development, it feels like they're even doing better. It feels like it has more direction now. I don't know if you see it that way.
Yeah, no, totally do. But I think they're just getting more of the game out. Like, it's getting to a stage now where they've got a lot of the work done on certain areas. Yeah, there's still core aspects of the game to get done, but they've got the studio size, the talent, and the rest of the tech in place to be able to build on those things to get persistent entity streaming out, to get server meshing out now, and they're pushing forward to that. I mean, Squadron 42 probably isn't that far away from release? ?
I wish.
I mean, we know they're in the UK at the moment, and like Chris Roberts is there helping to finish it out, whatever that means.
The last 5 years of development? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Is it a year? Is it 2?
Yeah.
Is it more?
Yeah, could be finishing it out for a while. Okay, the last question I wanted to ask in terms of kind of the way they've changed development, and this is a pretty easy one. Oh, geez, what is that? That is a big bee. Holy crap. Where did that even come from?
That's a good question.
Oh, no. Yeah, please don't fly into me. Just get back out. Go out the window. Over there. All right, give me 1 second.
No worries, mates.
Come on now. Get out of the room. Go that way. The window. The window. Oh, Jesus.
Is he all right? Is he okay? Do I need to call an ambulance? Oh no.
Woo! Yeah, buddy. Come in here no more. Nope. All right. Might cut that out. Might not.
No worries. I'm sure you taught that bee a lesson.
There's a big old murder hornet thing. Like, that was huge. I thought that was a bat for a second.
Oh, wow.
That was a good little battle. Anyways, oh, okay.
You're going to ask me one more question on the development of Squadron, I think?
Yes. So let me just write down when this happened so I remember to cut this out. It's about 28 minutes. Okay. So One more question about the development of the whole game and how it's changed. And this is a pretty easy one. Back before 3.0, they were mainly doing patches based on content, which led to kind of the Great Drought and
The Great Drought.
yeah, and like uneven updates. And ever since then, they were doing timed releases every quarter, relatively speaking. And it seems like now with PES, they've gotten to a point where they're like, this is a must, have to get this in. We're back to a content-based format. Do you think that the content-based format could be better, or do you think time-based is the way to go?
I think time, it's much of a muchness, and it depends on what's going on. So content is a must in some situations where they go, well, it can't be time-based because we have to get persistent entity streaming in, and then we have to get server meshing in. So I think they'll try and get 3.18 done by the end of the year now. I think they'll try and get 4.0 done by the middle of next year. That's sort of my expectation. Maybe they'll even skip 3.19.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think we'll even get a 319? That was always kind of, even since the letter for the chairman, I was always like, is there going to be a 319? Is that worth it?
Yeah, they didn't. They did say there was going to be a 319 by the end of the year a little while ago, maybe a few months ago now, but obviously that looks very unlikely.
Yeah.
So I quite liked them doing quarterly patches, but yeah, as I said, needs must.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I know I said that was going to be the last development sort of question. One more. What is something that you haven't been happy about in terms of the development?
Long development times and erratic communication from Cloud Imperium. That's the sort of main things.
Yeah, oh man, they're good at communication sometimes, and then other times they just really, I feel like they drop the ball.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about the game experience itself. Kind of general information for players who are interested in the game.
Okay.
Do you think that this game is going to be good for casual players? We know it's very detailed, pretty hard to learn, but once they have tutorials and a new player experience, do you think casual players will be able to find a good spot in this game?
So I think that's an interesting one, because obviously you've got casual people, you've got the sort of high-end sim people, and then you've got everyone in between.
Right.
Star Citizen, from what I understand it, they want it to be high immersion and high detail, but gamified. So it's not super casual, although it will have something for those players in. It's certainly not super sim, but again, there's going to be a lot of tactile little clicky things and lots of stuff that you can do to have a more sim experience if you want to. And I think you can sort of choose your level of sim entry.
Okay. Yeah, I've always felt like they were trying to go hardcore sim, and you probably can answer this better than me. And I feel like the game has gotten a bit more casual as we've gone along, but that also could just be that the implementation of features make it feel more casual. What do you think?
So I think they wanted to have sort of like the best damn space game you could have on a HOTAS. That's basically what their original idea was. But I think they've realized over time that they have to gamify a load of these systems, because otherwise they're not fun. And they've got such a big player base now, which is growing. So I think maybe they originally thought, let's have it as a sim game, hardcore sim. And they've evolved it to be much, much less of a hardcore sim now.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was feeling. When it comes to the gameplay itself, sometimes it's very difficult. Let's say you could be mining and using mining gadgets and consumables and just getting really deep into the gameplay. You could also take it very, very easily, basically sim versus casual when you're doing the same action. Do you think that's going to cause friction between players? Because a lot of players want it to keep getting deeper and be more difficult. A lot of players keep saying, cut it, stop. This is just a medical system. Why does it have to be so intense? Do you think that's going to continue to cause more and more splits in the player base, or do you think people are going to kind of find a middle ground there?
It depends on how detailed they go and what level of detail do you have to go into. I know some people dislike the fact they have to transit on trains, trams, and elevators, and travel it all the way to a planet's surface and
Yeah.
such. But what systems do you have in place that makes monotony or stuff that's overly detailed either more fun, or you can just sort of go, well, actually, I want a button that goes, do that easier. So, for example, with medical tools, the auto button allowing you to apply what fixes you need to a player immediately with the goo gun. That's good. That means I don't have to faff around too much. So that there needs to be a level of gamification and a level of ease of use that's not just like insane levels of detail.
Yeah, that's how I feel, and obviously feel like that'll also add a little bit more time to the development, of course. But I like that idea of sort of easy to pick up, very difficult to master. That whole conversation I've been seeing come up a lot with Jumptown recently, and some other more PvP focused interactions where people are definitely looking at these things from different perspectives. I guess let's talk a little bit about Jumptown. Did you get to play it much recently?
I only played in Jumptown once in was it last weekend? It was okay. I just messed around, picked up a few crates, and wasn't actually much going on for me. I was more interested in watching other people play some of the Jumptown stuff. Obviously, I saw Morph and a load of other players have a mixed set of experiences, from holding it locked down, not much happening, to a little bit of little battles there, to stuff just blowing up all the time everywhere.
Yeah. I had a good experience with it, better than I did last time. I got to sit in a ground vehicle this time, which is a lot better, because if I'm flying, then I'm never going to get anything done. So like, just put me off on a mountain with some missiles, and I'll do something useful. Obviously, there was a lot of conversation surrounding Jumptown this year, and kind of how is it supposed to be played? A lot of people feel like it should be, well, you know all about it. What is your take on kind of the argument, I guess? Do you have a side? Do you have feelings about it?
Cloud Imperium are testing out what sort of levels of emergent gameplay you get with the tools at people's disposal. And so you get a lot of different things happening. I think there are going to be tactics to deal with A2 bombers much more readily. For example, a lot of people are annoyed at the A2 bomber just being able to own a Jumptown. If you scatter and spread out more, that's not going to be so much of an issue. Yes, you have to drive your vehicle longer distance to make the money, but then you don't get blown up. Cloud Imperium will change
nice.
stuff. That is nice, but there's a lot of stuff in the future that's going to come along that's going to solve that. Death of a Spaceman, for one, is really going to help. And if they didn't have the A2, there would be another way players would find to more to win in the zone. There would be other ways they do things. So my point of view is the game is still sort of growing. It's all a gameplay experience, even if it's some people dropping a bomb on your head. I'd still enjoy it.
It's another pain of the development. We're playing with half of the pieces on the board game. Like it's not.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, you can't do everything to solve the problems. So some of the problems are very oversized right now. I get that.
And there's certainly no rule book there either.
Yeah.
And I think that's another problem, because people are saying, well, it shouldn't be done like that, or it should be done like this, or it's too low effort and easy to do this, and things like that. Well, they're not preventing you from doing it, and players are going to find the easiest method to win.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
It's kind of hard to come to terms with that when it comes to a sandbox game, that it's kind of like real life, but with less consequence. Like, people will do what they can to get what they want, and you're going to be tasked to figure out how to get around that.
Yeah.
And just to, I think, kind of help put it to bed, obviously this was a very intense conversation. A lot of people got involved and a lot of opinions were shared. Some people think that some other people can influence CIG to make decisions based on their own opinions. Do you feel like CIG weighs anybody else's opinions differently about this stuff? Do you actually see them making a change based on a minority of players or a certain group of players?
So they said either yesterday or today, basically, they don't weigh any individual's opinion, be they streamer or content creator or whoever, more than another player. Really, they'll listen to everyone and then they'll work out what they want to do based on all the feedback and what's sensible to do. However, yeah, I think that people are still individuals. And if the right developer hears from someone they trust or someone they like or watches a particular streamer, I do think they're going to be influenced by them. Even if it's just something they bring to someone else's attention. Now, do I think that's sort of like really going to aggressively affect the game? Probably not. Do I think it's a problem? Again, probably not. But do I know people have biases and people are just individuals that listen to each other? Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly going to be. They're not a computer.
They made a statement about that?
Yeah, so they made a statement about the A2 bomber and a thread. Let me see if I can.
I did not know that.
Bring it up. Yeah, CIG, please don't listen to morphologists on nerfing the A2. Basically, the original post just disagrees with morphologists' take that the A2 is low effort and unfun. And CIG responds saying, feedback on balance and gameplay design is open to everyone, and we encourage everyone to submit issue councils, spectrum threads, or other kinds of feedback like on YouTube. When it comes to taking on feedback, we never discriminate between streamers versus non-streamers, PvE versus PvP players, miners versus bounty hunters, or newbies versus pros. And then they just go on to say, we listen to everyone, yay!
I heard they like pirates more.
Apparently, that is also what I've heard. But the people that are not pirates say that they listen to the pirates, and the people that are pirates say they listen to their PvEers. So,
they're dirty UEE rats. That's what I've heard.
Well, everyone's going to just assume that they're being underprivileged compared to another group in Star Citizen.
Yeah, it's nice that they'll communicate on the matter, but I personally don't think I've ever seen it be a problem. They definitely seem to focus on making sure the game is fun and balanced. I don't think they've really gone that hard on balance, but it feels like most of the changes that they make are based on what they see happening in the game rather than what people are saying outside of, feedback threads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I honestly didn't have any bad experiences with the A2, so I don't really have much to say about it, but I do think there's plenty more to do to balance all of this. That being said, this is all about Jumptown, a group event, kind of like other group events we've gotten. Star Citizen as a whole is better played with friends, in my opinion. Maybe not better, but you get more fun. You get more of the experience unlocked. Do you think this is a game that will be adequate for solo players in the future?
I think there's going to be a lot of things that solo players can sink their teeth into. I mean, and just how solo do you mean? Do you mean that they don't want to have any human contact?
No.
Or they never want to work with a player or group?
I think this should always be a game that makes you work with other people. But I sometimes worry that progression might be stunted if you can't manage to find a group of friends to fly around with you once you start to get into more complex gameplay or ships like that. And I wonder if people are going to be able to have enough fun to continue to just play on their own for years and still feel like they have fresh content.
I think so. I mean, I think Cloud Imperium are going to obviously keep on expanding the game out. I think that there's going to be a lot for solo players to do. And just because they're not in an org and don't have a group that they regularly play with doesn't mean that they can't have those interactions with players when they need to or want to. It depends on exactly what they want to do. Obviously, there is going to be some big fleet battle stuff that is conducive to have a group or have an org.
Yeah.
And you might be missing out on some of that.
I always wonder about like that sort of scenario. Two orgs are going at it. huge war. They leave a bunch of ships, and then you just have this solo player and a little vulture come out, start cleaning things up on the side. Nobody notices. I'm just getting some booty after the battle.
Hope no one notices.
Yeah. But I always think about that when I think about solo players. Like, what can you do that players in groups would never be able to do because they just stick out like a sore thumb?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about 3.18. Pretty big update. It's got a lot of stuff coming in it. Persistent entity streaming and the cargo refactor seem to be kind of the big back-end tech sort of advances. Super important. PEZ is really what's holding everything up. But what we don't hear talked about too often, do you think Gen 12, the renderer, might finish its implementation in 3.18?
I don't think it's going to finish in 3.18. I think there will be a lot more of the Gen 12 renderer done for 3.18. I think it's sort of like a 3.19/4.0 thing, the Gen 12 stuff, because it's close to being complete from what Cloud Imperium have said. But it's not done yet. So I'd expect more from Gen 12 in 3.18, but not its not fully implemented.
You think it'll be anything noticeable? Always looking for a couple frames, just a couple.
Probably. It depends just how far along it is. I think that their main focus is persistent entity streaming in the patch. But you can always hope for more frames.
Oh gosh, I hope, I pray, I do a dance. Wake up in the morning before the sun goes up and light a fire. More frames, please. I get terrible frame rates in this game. It's like,
really,
I average probably 20 to 25 frames. I never go above 30.
Oh, well, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's miserable. I don't really play that much because of it.
I sort of get 50 to almost 60.
Really?
Yeah, and I get annoyed that I don't get 60 like consistently.
That sounds beautiful. Sometimes I do get like a spike up to 40, 50 frames per second, and I honestly believe that I'm playing in fast motion. I'm like, I just moved too fast. Why? The game broke.
I remember when it was single-digit frames back in the day, so I'm much happier with what we have now.
Yeah. 3.0 to 3.3 was very, very, very bad for me. God, that was I remember when object container streaming came in, and I was like, so this is it. This is what they've been talking about. The promised land. 15 frames per second. Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah. They also were talking about persistent entity streaming possibly helping with performance. Is that correct? Are they thinking, from what you've heard, that there might be some performance improvements from it?
Yeah, but there could also be problems with the performance. Okay, so
of course, yeah.
Let me give you some examples. If you're talking about client-side performance, if I've put 3,000 objects in front of you that you then turn a corner to see 3,000 hospital gowns, you're not going to have a great time. Yeah, you're not going to be having the best time on your client. So there's a lot of potential improvements to the server and the way they handle entities that persistent entity streaming could bring. And if they improve netcode and stuff like that along with it, which they almost certainly will, that could be quite good. Are you going to see more frame rate, personally? Probably not. If anything, in 3.18, unless they've moved a lot further with the Gen 12 renderer stuff, I think you'd probably see a bit of a frame rate drop. But that's just me. There's just going to be too many items everywhere.
Yeah, my prayers go unanswered once again. Yeah, there's going to be medical gowns all over the place. I really... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let's see how they clean them up. They must have something planned for that. They have to. Otherwise, the elevators are just going to get clogged up by them.
Yeah, I am really hope that they do something about whenever there's something that needs to be disappeared, whether it's like a ship or a box or like a bottle. I hope they bring in the respective NPC to take it. Like if it's a ship, they bring in like a salvage ship and come in and delete it because it's been there for 2 weeks. That would be great. And then I'd also love to do some community work picking up bottles if I get a crime stat.
Yes, I really like the idea of it. I think that for all of that, you need janitors, you need players to be able to do some of these missions, you need NPCs to do clean up. Yeah, great idea.
It's gonna be good. What are you thinking about the kind of delay of 3.18, the communication surrounding it? How do you feel about it?
I'm not too happy with them just sort of like going, Ooh, we're having discussions for 2 weeks about what we're doing. Okay, well, they've sort of roughly said they were aiming to have 3.18 with persistent entity streaming in either Cardi hands by the end of this month, but we don't know if that's still the plan. Um, and that was only a rough sort of estimate. They haven't said, look, even if we did get 3.18 in a good place and it goes, it's probably going to be the last patch we get this year. They don't communicate enough with stuff like this when they need to, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And they can just say, look, it's being delayed for a little bit. It's probably going to be around here. We'll tell you more in the short term. The thing is that they're trying to avoid bad press. As soon as they say officially there's a delay for something, there's 1,000 articles that come out about Star Citizen delayed again. Star Citizen is a game in development and it's still not out. It's basically the title that all the companies go with now,
Yep.
written in weird ways.
We're hitting 10 years and 500 million at the same time. Oh my gosh, it's perfect.
$500 million, and people are trying to warm their homes, and Star Citizen is still not out. Okay.
Trade your ships for gas, CIG.
Oh my god, they're right. But yeah, I don't know. It's they need to communicate better with the stuff like this, and they need to be less risk averse when it comes to telling us things,
Mm-hmm.
and communicating more regularly on whether it be timeframes or delays or whatever. We're big boys, we can handle it. We're along for the ride with the development. Don't just go, oh, don't tell them about the delay. We'll announce it when we also say there's a new ship. Something.
Yeah. Oh gosh, the timing sometimes of them is just not great. So given the 318 status, even if the Evocati was to come in September, there's definitely the possibility of 2, 3, 4, possibly even 5. We really don't know how many months of testing before PES goes live. Do you think there's a good chance that we could see a pretty big delay in really the update timeline at this point, 4.0 getting pushed out of next year?
I'm optimistically hoping that they get 3.18 out by the end of the year. And I think that they can do that. It depends on how broken persistent entity streaming is when it's in the hands of the Evocati. It might be something that actually it goes pretty well and there's no problem, bam, they easily punt it out. I think it's quite possible that they might merge 3.9 into 4.0 and we see a 4.0 patch Q2 next year, something like that. It is a bit up in the air. It is a virgin territory. We don't really know what's going on there. And that's because Cloud Imperium are not communicating.
Yeah,
they will. They choose not to at the moment.
Yeah, they seem to like to, once they have something significant to share along with the news. Right now, it feels like the fog of war is kind of sitting out there.
I think one of the worst things that Cloud Imperium have got for the consumer, for us, for the backers, is the marketing department. Because I at least this is the way I see it. I see them advising them when to give information and when not to give information. That's what it feels to me. That's what it looks to me. And I'd rather just be given the information, warts and all.
Yeah, you don't want marketing to be making development decisions, really.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they 100% are. They're saying that's what it feels like. That's what it looks like to me.
You don't want them to do it. You also don't want it to look like they're doing it.
Yeah.
It's all about kind of how the backers are seeing things. And I've definitely noticed, obviously we always have cycles, right, of how people feel about the project, but I've definitely noticed a lot more people being a little bit disappointed in the way that they're communicating as opposed to just the fact that they're not. People got the news that they were looking for, and I saw a lot more acknowledgement of, hey, this has happened before, stop doing this. This isn't the way to do this. And usually, at least in the past, I feel like I've noticed more just kind of flat out, they're too late with this. Or positive reaction to the news. But yeah, it just, I don't know, the reactions feel a little bit different now than they used to, for me at least.
Okay.
So kind of to wrap things up, server meshing is sort of the big thing that we're waiting for. with 4.0, and PES is going into that. A lot of other things are going into that. After server meshing, they will be working towards stabilizing it and then also dynamic server meshing.
Mhm.
Do you feel like they're going to have, or do you feel like you can predict kind of a major direction they're going to go in after that? There are so many things I think they could do and focus towards, and I almost want to tell them to just go towards base building, but there's a lot of like features and things that they need to do. Do you think that there's going to be like a major sort of pillar they're working towards, since server meshing would be
So
in the
I
background?
think it's going to be major pillars per sets of departments,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously AI is severely lacking in the game at the moment. And
Yes.
I'm talking about AI crew. I'm talking about actually sensible AI that to fight against. So there's a lot of AI work that they need to do, and that's going to be a major focus for them for sure. They're going to want to expand out more star systems. We know they're also working on the Nix system. Um, they're going to want to get in loads more gameplay features and stuff like that. They're going to want to get in physicalized components and physical damage. That's got to be something they want to push as soon as possible. We know they're working on the resource system, so the power relay system,
Yeah. Yeah.
like circuits around ships and stuff like that, which is sort of connected to physicalized components as well. So yeah, there's going to be quite a lot that they focus on simultaneously, because well, they've got lots of departments and lots of sets of teams.
Yeah.
And obviously they're going to want to get Squadron 42 out the door. And once they've got that out the door, that represents the most of the core of the game being complete as well, even for the persistent universe. Just because all ships will fly in the same way, everything's sort of standardized and sort of everything. There's a good sort of set of stuff that's had gold passes. So it is a mystery sometimes knowing exactly what Clan Imperium are going to want to do. But I think it's safe to say that, well, there's a lot they're going to be doing after server meshing comes out. And
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, expanding out a couple more star systems with the Nix system, getting physicalized components out, getting better AI, and getting AI controlled ships, blades first, and then AI controlled ships, or at least crew, and that sort of stuff in much better states. Is probably going to be their focus, but I don't know for sure.
In terms of gameplay, it really does feel like there's a lot of stuff kind of meeting all at once right now. Hacking and engineering and life support and the damage maps with salvage and all this stuff kind of coming together. What you talked about, the ability to damage ships and kind of, I guess, for them to be disabled instead of destroyed, is a big one that I've been waiting to hear more about, and they've been a little mum on details about. But I think that's really going to make a big difference in how everybody considers the game, how people consider the balance of ships, and the professions involved around ships too. I mean, that's a big one. And I do hope that they talk more about that quickly after 4.0.
Well, I'm hoping that they talk a bit more about that at CitizenCon this year.
That would be nice.
So there's a lot of stuff that they can really make backers feel a lot better by talking about some of the longer term plans for all of these components and things they've got for the next year or two. So I'm hoping that they take the initiative and do that.
Do you think they'll talk past 4.0 at this CitizenCon?
Well, they're going certainly for certain things,
Mhm.
but it might be very like minor things, like some of the dynamic universe simulation stuff.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they do a bigger sort of look. This is the longer term plan as we see it at the moment. This might change, but we want to get into positions where we've got this running by then, and potentially Squadron 42 sort of, and then this next sort of milestone. I want them to talk about those milestones and those pillars, because I think it's sort of important just to know where we're going.
Yeah.
Some lighthouses in the distance would be
Yes.
nice.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are missing the long-term goal, especially newer
Mhm.
players who didn't get to see all those design docs and stuff from before. Because anybody who's joined after 2018 hasn't heard a lot of the plans for the deeper gameplay and stuff they want to do. That would be nice.
Well, it's partially because Clan Imperium try to obscure that deeper gameplay because they want it to be in a state that it's either in the player's hands so they can iterate on it, or because they want to get it into a state themselves that's ready for the player, because they're scared that they're going to have to change it after a player's seen the document.
Hmm.
And then people are going to be annoyed because it didn't do it like that. It did it like this. But I'm annoyed that it didn't do it like that. I don't want it like this. I want it like that.
Yeah,
So I really don't like that sort of mentality where they're worried about people disliking their development choices. They need to own it and open up development even more.
absolutely.
That's what I'd like.
Yeah, just pick your direction, pick what you want to do, and go with it. That would be nice.
Yeah.
I enjoy the fact that we get to help with the development and kind of steer the way that they're doing things, but I do think they could be more proactive and less reactive at times.
Yes, I think they are overly reactive sometimes. And I love the fact the project's reactive as well. Don't get me wrong. I just think they're overly reactive a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. I know I said that was going to be us closing up, but I wanted to ask one more thing about persistent entity streaming. So
Okay.
I have been very excited about the idea of objects persisting anywhere in the game and all that stuff. I only it just shows how inexperienced I am when it comes to MMOs. I only really just realized that most games don't do that. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like the ability for entities to persist outside of player inventories and things that really have them attached to a player is a pretty big deal in the industry as a whole. Would you agree with that?
At the scale of Star Citizen, yes.
Okay.
It's to do with the scale and the fact that it's a multiplayer game, but yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The multiplayer aspect of it seems like a big part of it. The networking that goes involved with that. You say also the scale. Are there other smaller MMOs or games that you've heard of doing stuff like this?
Well, I mean, there's stuff that's tracked to some degrees in lots of games, but not to the extent that Star Citizen wants to do it. Obviously, the clear up is done sort of like, well, they don't care if you just see things disappear in most games. So lots of games do it to some extent, but persistent entity streaming's a bit more complex in the fact that they want some objects or most objects will be like, well, actually that's sort of there permanently until it gets cleared up, and the servers will save that data even between effectively resets or crashes or whatever.
Yeah.
So it is long-term persistent.
Do you think that this feature, if it works how they want it to, will translate into positive press for them? Do you think people will pick up on it in the industry, or will it kind of just go under the radar?
If it works and works well, and there's silly memes and players do silly things with it, yes, it'll be fantastic. It depends on in what state we get it in its first iteration, and is it still a buzzword when we have it?
Okay. I wonder how this stuff is viewed outside of the community, because Star Citizen generally isn't seen as making a big deal of things. But when they start to actually hit some of these goals that they've had for a while with tech that's relatively impressive, I do wonder how it's perceived outside of the community. That's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people now that are a lot softer on Star Citizen than they were. They're less aggressive about it when they write about it. And there's a lot of new journalists now that have never even really covered Star Citizen before. So I actually think that they're in quite a good place for some positive sort of journalist work.
So
media.
for one of the very first times in the industry, a video game has managed to outage its detractors and bring in a new crowd.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
That's pretty good. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this show. This is a great hour of some good information. I think clears up a lot of things, a lot of questions that people have about the game and the history. Most of the people who watch this probably know who you are, but for those who don't, why don't you share the kind of content you make, where you make it, and when, I guess, streaming stuff.
I'm Board Gamer. I stream erratically, but typically on Tuesdays and Fridays at sort of 3 p.m.-ish UK time. And you can see me on my YouTube channel, Board Gamer UK, and my Twitch channel, Board Gamer UK as well. I produce content on Star Citizen pretty much every day, Star Citizen news, and then sort of hot topics and that sort of stuff. I've been doing it for several years now. I'm one of the at least 7 years plus, maybe.
Yeah,
on
definitely.
Just Star Citizen with average at least a video a day, which is crazy to think about it. But yeah, if you want some Star Citizen content and you want to see the Star Citizen news, then maybe check me out. There's other people that make Star Citizen news, but I'm also here.
I have watched your videos since I started following Star Citizen, I want to say, so at least 7 years, probably 8. I'm sitting here with a legend. So thanks for everything that you've done for the game. You have brought and informed so many people about it, and inspired people like myself even to start making content. A lot of us didn't have to struggle through all those years. So thank you for providing content and information and news about it. And thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. And it's nice to see more and more content creators come into the fold and actually produce stuff on Star Citizen and really enjoy it. So.
Yeah, it's really growing. Well, anyways, thanks again. And thank you all for coming and watching or listening, whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. You can always support this podcast as well by becoming a Patreon member, YouTube channel member, and coming and watching these shows live. Regardless, thank you for coming. I'll see you in next week's episode. Have a good one.